Alright, so sometimes I'm often asked what are my rare and expensive games that I have in my collection. So what I did is I picked out 15 of what I feel are expensive games. There's a couple rare ones in there, and I'm just going to show those to you, give you a brief overview on some of them. So the first one I have is Spot Goes to Hollywood for the Sega 32X. This game itself is not necessarily expensive. It was unreleased, and it was done for Cowlitz Gamers for Kids by 8-Bit Evolution. And so this is basically, some say it's a reproduction cart. It was, like I said, never released. I do have number 3 of 35. And so it's one of those things that, you know, only 35 were printed, even if it is a reproduction, and so it's still a great piece to have in my collection. The game itself, I would not advise trying to find one of these, being that there were only 35 copies. Finding one on eBay or anywhere else would be extremely difficult, and the game plays pretty much identical to the Sega Genesis version. So if you're going after one, definitely get the Sega Genesis version. There's not too much else to say about the game. It's got a little bit better graphics because it was for the 32X. The game was pretty much finished, and so that's why they were able to make it into a physical release for charity. So there's that one. The next one is rare and expensive, and it is Spider-Man Web of Fire. So this is again for the 32X. There are rumored to only be about 1,500 copies of this game ever made. And so getting a hold of this is, if you haven't already, it's going to be a little bit difficult. It's easy to find, but it's expensive. I think right now they're going for around $200. And so this is the cartridge. You have to be very careful. Most of the games I go over today, there are repros on eBay, so you have to be very cautious when looking out for these. This is basically a side-scroller Spider-Man game. It's definitely not the greatest game. It's not that it's difficult. Parts of it are difficult, but the game overall just isn't the greatest. There are other Spider-Man games, especially for the Genesis, like Maximum Carnage, that I would definitely recommend over top of this one. The next game, on the other hand, is extremely fun. It is Musha. So Musha isn't necessarily rare, but it is quite expensive. As of the making of this video, prices go, I think, for upwards of $150 to $200 for this game. It is basically a vertical shooter. It's a great game to play. It is only one player, which I always found as a drawback. I thought it would have been a good two-player game. Needless to say, though, it is wonderful. This is probably one of my favorite and most suggested games for anybody that has a Sega Genesis. The next game, Crusaders Ascenti. So this, along with Musha, are probably two of the most expensive retail released games for the Sega Genesis. This one, again, is in that same price range of about $150 to $200 loose. It's an RPG. It plays similar to like a Legend of Zelda. It's got some neat Sega throw-ins. Sonic the Hedgehog makes an appearance in the game. It's a really cool game. The music is wonderful. I love the music in this game. So that's another expensive game. It is an Atlas title. So limited print. I'm not sure how many copies actually exist. The next one is Conker's Bad Fur Day for the Nintendo 64. This was, I think, one of the only mature rated games for the Nintendo 64. There's a lot of adult humor and some of those antics within the game. In fact, on the bottom of the game, it actually says, advisory, this game is not for anyone under age 17. This game is upwards of, last time I checked, $80 to $100. If you want to play this game, and you have an Xbox One, I suggest getting the Rare Replay disc. It has this game on it. That's the easiest way to play Conkers. The next game is another 32X game, and it's probably it is the only sports title that is in my set that is kind of rare. It's up there in price. It's about $100 loose, and it is World Series Baseball featuring Deion Sanders. This game is... I'm still not sure why it's pricey, honestly. Most 32X games are a little bit up there in price. It's a baseball game. That's pretty much all there is to say about it. It's got Deion Sanders in it. It has Barry Bonds. They say it has 700 MLB players in it. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but this was one of the harder ones for me to find. Ultimately, I ended up getting this one on eBay, complete in box. I actually traded the box, and I think I got about $50 for the box. So something to keep an eye out, even if you are a loose collector. Some of these boxes, especially for the 32X game, can get you a lot in trade value. Okay, the next game is Casino Kid 2 for the NES. So this is one of those games that is expensive, isn't the greatest. I enjoy playing it. It's got, I think, 4 or 5 casino games on it. You basically go to 4 or 5 different countries, and you can play blackjack and a couple other games. It's pretty neat. The reason this game is expensive is Casino Kid 1, which is probably one of the cheapest titles for the NES, didn't do very well. This was a late release sequel to it, and obviously it didn't sell well because the first one didn't do that great. Okay, the next one is Punisher for the Genesis. So Punisher is basically a beat 'em up. It's 1 or 2 player, so you can do 2 players simultaneous. It plays similar to a Streets of Rage. And this one, I think, is around $70 right now. Pitfall. So, Pitfall was the very last game I ever got to complete my 32X collection. I found this very difficult to find. Price-wise is about $65 to $70. However, finding one was very difficult. So, it took me about 6 months before I even seen one pop up on eBay. And I have a automated eBay watcher that monitors eBay every day. So obviously once it popped up, I jumped on it. I actually just did the buy it now for $65 because it was the only game I didn't have in my collection and very difficult to find. The next one is Blackthorn. So this was the second to last game to complete my collection right before Pitfall. And at the time I bought this, there was actually Pitfall and Blackthorn on eBay. I opted to get Blackthorn because I thought it was going to be harder to get in the future because I rarely see it. Obviously I was wrong. But needless to say, it is a wonderful game. I love this game. It's, again, in that $60 to $70 range, loose. And it's kind of like Doom meets Prince of Persia. So it's got that Prince of Persia feel to it, you know, where you're running between levels, entering doors, reaching enemies, while you're holding a shotgun. And so it's very neat. You know, there's people hanging from chains, so you can just shoot them. I think you're supposed to be helping them, but you can just turn around and pop them with a shotgun. So that's pretty cool. The next one is Splatterhouse 3 for the Sega Genesis. Splatterhouse 2 would be on this list, but I do not have it. So, Splatterhouse 3 is very neat. It's, I think, one of the only games for the Sega Genesis to have a non-linear gameplay. Meaning, it's basically a side-scroller as well as vertical. So it's got that kind of 3D effect to it, where you go side to side, but then you go upwards to enter doors, which take you into like another part of the map. And so it's kind of half puzzle, half beat 'em up. It's a pretty neat game. The next one is Calibri, which is very interesting. So this is for the Sega 32X. This one, I actually got this game from DK Oldies, the online shop, when they decided to stop selling 32X games. This was about a year ago, and I actually picked this up for $20 from them. I think this sells for about $50, probably $40 to $50 range. And it's basically you're a hummingbird, and it's kind of like a shoot 'em up. So you are basically flying through forest, through the scenery, and you're shooting insects and other figures that are trying to come at you. That's a pretty neat game. The next one, which is probably one of the best games for the Sega 32X, if not the best, is Knuckles Chaotix. This game's in the $40 to $50 range, and it doesn't have great praise, mainly because of the gameplay style, but once you get used to it, you really appreciate it. So it's got a rubber band type gameplay, where essentially the person you're playing with, which it's single player, but the person is basically attached to you with a rubber band mechanics. So some of the gauge, you have to step on 2 switches to enter. So you put them on 1 switch, you hold down A, and then 1, and you go over to the next switch, and then once you release, you basically slingshot forward. It's a very neat game. Definitely recommended. The next one is Mega Turrican. So this is another shooter. It's basically, what can I say? It's a shooter. It's a really good game though. If you can't afford Musha, it is a different style game, but if you can't afford Musha, look at Truxton. If you can't afford Truxton, which is in like the $50, I think $50 to $60 range, then definitely look at this. I think this right now is in the $35 to $45 range. This is a great shooter. And the last one, which is probably one of my favorite games on the Genesis, is Gunstar Heroes. So this plays very much like a Metal Slug or a Contra. It's a lot more fast-paced, a lot more enemies, and it is multiplayer, which is phenomenal. You could basically, there's 2 styles of gameplay, where you can kind of have a fixed anchor when you're shooting, or you can have it freeform, where you can basically aim and it'll shoot wherever you aim. It's a really fun game. I definitely recommend checking that out. So those are my 15 most expensive / some rare games that I have in my collection. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for future content like this. And don't forget to check out my Facebook page, my Twitter, and I also now have a Patreon, so be sure to check that out. I do 2 videos a week. Right now, I'm doing a primary video on a Sunday, and I'm also doing a tutorial style video on throughout the week, either on Wednesday or Thursday. And those are mainly around game development. Right now I'm targeting the Xbox One, as well as Windows, using the Windows Universal Platform. So be sure to check those out if you're interested, and feel free to comment below, any thoughts you have on my collection. These are, like I said, the most expensive games I have in mind. Let me know what you have in yours. Do you have a Splatterhouse 2? Do you have Outback Joey, a Heartbeat Personal Trainer, Miracle Piano? Do you have Mega Man 5? Do you have Flintstones Dinosaur Peak? Let me know what you have and what you thought about this video. Thanks for watching.